everyone. My name is Pete Ferrari. Welcome to the Super Self podcast series brought to you by Jaca Rare Sugar. As you know, in this podcast, we talk about everything that is health and well-being. Well, today we're going to just jump. And that's exactly the mantra that I have lived my life by since I was very young, which we'll discuss today. Now, folks throughout history who are far more erudite and accomplished than I am have said this simple phrase metaphorically much more poignantly, but I kind of like the way I say it. If you look at Machiavelli, for example, fortune favors the bold. Nice and poetic, sounds great. General George Patton, a good plan violently executed today is far better than a perfect plan executed next week. Powerful, forceful, right? Maverick, don't think, just do, right? Even Maverick. All of these different ways to say the same thing really become fundamental and really become important if this is a way that you like to live your life. Now, I'm Pete Ferrari. I'm from the gutter. I say just jump. And this is a phrase that I coined when I was very, very young, actually a teenager. Y'all have heard about my background where I was bullied and beaten and battered every single day after my father was killed through my childhood, and I started lifting weights to defend myself. Well, at a base level, when I started to get stronger, as I've described, when I started to put on muscle in order to protect myself, when I was getting into these fights, even after I was preparing to defend myself, I still wasn't engaging. I was still taking the whippings. And what would happen was the fight would begin and, you get that knee wobble for anybody that's ever been in a situation like that with a physical altercation. The adrenaline starts running. He starts wobbling. At that point, it's too late. You are already overcome with thoughts of doubt, thoughts of insecurity, thoughts of, oh no, physical harm is about to befall me. By then, it's too late. And this was something that had been well established in a pattern for me where I would just take the beating and move on. So it was even harder for me to change that trajectory, to break that cycle and overcome. And what I realized was if I waited even 3 seconds when something was about to happen, even if it meant protecting myself physically from a beating that really hurt me, if I waited even 3 seconds, I was succumbing. I was continuing to be the victim. So I had to come up with something where I would engage without giving it any thought. Just jump. When everything started to go down, I would just jump. Win or lose, jump into the action, take the repercussions as they befall you, and at that point, begin to grow, begin to build upon that type of a base, as opposed to the base of constantly being victimized. Now, I submit to you that you will never, ever be sorry if you just jump. A little bit of forethought and then make a move. Even if it goes sideways, even if you end up being wrong, there's no hole that you can dig that's deep enough that you can't build your way out of. And what happens on the other end of that mistake, what happens on the other end of that problem is more experience. It's thicker skin for the next time. There's an old saying that I've loved to live my life by. Good judgment is the product of experience. Experience is the product of bad judgment, right? Well, I like to think I'm pretty wise. My daughter will tell you at this point at 22, finally, she recognizes that I'm never wrong. But the reason why in her eyes I'm never wrong is because I've made so many mistakes in my life. I've made billions of mistakes, which has hopefully awarded me just a little bit of sophistication and a little bit of knowledge. And that's really where I'm coming from with the just jump mentality, win, lose, or draw. This started, not only did it start in my personal life when I was taking the beatings, but it transcended into what would become my professional life. Right when I first graduated from college, a year out of college, I went to work at MCI. This was right after deregulation, when AT&T broke up. MCI and Sprint were on the scene, and it was a situation where there was a highly competitive market, and I was out there selling commercial telephone long-distance service to companies. Well, I stumbled upon a loophole in AT&T's tariff that enabled me to aggregate many, many small businesses into seemingly one giant business and get all of those small businesses awarded the discounts that the big giant Fortune 10 companies were getting. In that case, it was 32%, which was massive. So little companies could get a 32% discount off of their long distance service out of state. This is 1989, way before cell phones, which put it under MCI and Sprint, but it gave you the quality of AT&T's pipes. Everybody wanted it. Well, I'm a year out of college. I am tremendously in debt with school loans. I am barely eating. I am still a knucklehead, wet behind the ears business person, but I just jumped. I bought a book, Entrepreneurial Manifesto, How to Start a Business. I still have it 40 years later. Started a sole proprietorship and launched that company. Heavily in debt, barely any experience, but I knew that the opportunity was solid based upon my knowledge of the marketplace. Jumped into that business. I had people around me telling me to go get a job. It was a waste of time. Even my own mother at that point was telling me that it was never going to work and I was never going to succeed. But I didn't listen to her. I knew I had something there. I just jumped and I sold that company 3 years later at 10x revenue, which is a pretty big number, paid off all my debt and moved to Atlanta. That was another just jump. Huge inflection point in my life. I had never really been outside of Connecticut because I'm incredibly poor, as I've told everybody, and you don't necessarily get to travel when you're a poor kid. You're not flying off to Aspen. You're not headed to the Caymans. You're basically trapped outside of Hartford, Connecticut and Storrs, Connecticut, where you went to school, and that's about it. Well, my best friend and I from UConn, we decided to drive to Mardi Gras in New Orleans. Well, I was 24 years old at that point. I'd been with US Telephone, which was that company, for a couple of years. We drove to New Orleans from New Haven, Connecticut. We stayed overnight in Atlanta. That was the first time I had ever been to Atlanta. It was, as you can expect, before Mardi Gras. It was like late January. Well, it was sunny. It was warm. People were in a great mood. Everybody was beautiful. Nothing like what I left in Connecticut in January. 30 inches of snow, gray and miserable. Everybody's in a bad mood. We went to Atlanta. We stayed overnight on the way, and I said, I'm moving here. And my buddy was like, yeah, okay, whatever. So we went down to Mardi Gras. We had a blast, went home. I packed a minivan, and I moved to Atlanta. I just jumped. I knew it was where I needed to be. And I could always go home. I could always pack the minivan and move back to Connecticut, but I just jumped. What ended up happening was I met my best friend of 35, almost 40 years there. He and I built tech companies together in Atlanta and California, made millions of dollars for investors. That was really the launching pad for my life. As simple as a just jump move to Atlanta from Connecticut. That easy. Even if it failed, nothing was going to eat me, wasn't going to die, just move back to Connecticut. Resume, pick up where I left off. So I think it's really a metaphor for what you can do in your life if you kind of put and too much analysis, hyper-analysis, analysis paralysis, as they call it, off to the side. Use your instincts, as I've said through every single one of these podcasts. If instinctively it makes sense, just jump. Figure out the rest later. Many other periods and people in history who have adopted the just jump mentality, and it's worked out incredibly well for them. You take Amelia Earhart, right? The story behind Amelia Earhart, first woman to ever do that transplanted flight, is really an amazing story. But what a lot of people don't know is they didn't just give her a plane and say, go ahead. All of that stuff had to be approved back then. It had to go through its various certifications and had to go back through its various governing bodies in order to be approved. Flight plans and all of that good stuff. Well, they didn't just say, okay, we're going to let you do it because you're a woman and it's equal rights. Women were still beaten down at that point. Women still did not have a lot of power in this country at that point. What she was initially offered was the ability to sit in the passenger seat of a similar flight with a male pilot and watch, not co-pilot, not participate, not plan any of the mappings, not plan any of the trip, just sit there and watch. Now, when I first heard this story, as I was fast forwarding in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, man, if I'm Amelia Earhart, I say, fuck off. No deal. But guess what? She did the opposite. She just jumped. She said, sure, I'll do it, because she knew that if she just jumped and took that seemingly little step, she would be one step closer to getting what she wanted, which was that solo flight. And she got it. She just jumped. Now, she actually had some potential risk there. Let's say that plane went down, but she still just jumped, right? And it worked out for her. We've all heard the story about Fred Smith from FedEx. There are varying stories with his ability to make payroll. The company was going under, and he went to Vegas and put it all on the craps table. Some say he bet $25,000 and he won enough to make payroll. The real story is that he had $5,000. He bet $5,000. He actually won $24,000. That enabled him to make payroll. FedEx was about to go under. The FedEx that we know today was going to go under. He just jumped, went to Vegas, put $5,000 on the craps table, won $25,000, And that gave him enough time, making that payroll one more time, to secure $11 million and fund it to keep the company going and become the global juggernaut FedEx that we know today. He just jumped. What was the worst that was going to happen? He'd go bankrupt, lose the $5,000, go bankrupt, not make payroll. Well, he was doing that anyway. Instinctively, he needed to make a move. He just jumped, and it benefited him. And I think it's really a testament to people when they rely upon themselves to perform, when they rely upon themselves to figure it out. And there have been many, many studies done, and people don't realize this. There have been many, many studies done where they've found that when your back is against the wall, when you are the most stressed out / the most desperate, that is when you are the most creative. That is when you hit a gear you don't even know you had with regard to being able to figure out a plan, your resourcefulness, your resiliency, your ability to take that punch after punch after punch at the very end when you thought you were through and figure it out. That's when you become your very best, when your back is against the wall. One of the most famous houses in history. You've all heard of the waterfall house, Frank Lloyd Wright. Well, there's an interesting story behind that. Frank Lloyd Wright, right, one of the greatest architects in history. Amazing. The waterfall house, his most famous design by far. Well, here's how that came about. He got a huge commission from a super rich guy to design this house that nobody had ever seen before. Okay, great. Took the money. Couldn't think of anything to do. Was not inspired. Was blocked. Had no idea. So over time, naturally, the rich guys wanting to see some drafts, wanting to see some plans, wanting to see something for his money. Frank Lloyd Wright was like, okay, yeah, hey, give me a week. Kept stalling, had nothing. Finally, the rich guy got fed up and said, listen, I'm coming over there today. I want to see plans. Enough is enough. Frank Lloyd Wright was like, okay, had nothing. Well, it was at that moment, after months and months of stalling, months and months of block, I'm coming over today. I paid you a ton of money. I want to see something. It was at that moment when his back was against the wall, his reputation was on the line, his fame was completely at risk, that he designed the waterfall home, his most famous home. That is indicative of what we have the ability to do as human beings. We are so amazing as creatures of thought and creatures of innovation, and what we have the ability to do, what we have the ability to endure, but nobody's leveraging that, especially nowadays with all of these phrases that let people off the hook. You don't have to do certain things that are even slightly uncomfortable because there's a label for that. We don't have to do this because it's slightly hard, because if we don't do that, then we'll be called this, and that's not fair. Well, that's not the way life works. If we want to be successful, we've really got to take our lives by the reins, and we've got to figure out how to make it happen for ourselves. And it's interesting, at least for me in particular, I'm not trying to get all toxic male on anybody. This is just me, the way I'm wired, 100% Sicilian, dug myself out of the gutter, put myself through college, have been building companies for 40 years. This is just the way I'm wired. But when I am analyzing a situation that is seemingly dire, I think about one thing at this point and one thing only. The just jump thing is so inherent to me. It's so instinctive to me that I'm always ready to jump. That pattern is there. I don't have to worry about it. So what I'll do now is I'll think to myself, okay, when I'm on my deathbed, when I have lived this entire life for better or for worse, for all of the benefits and all of the burdens, when I'm on my deathbed, I'm going to ask myself one single question. And this is me. This is not necessarily you, but this is me. One question. Was I a man or was I a punk? That's the only question I want an answer to, because it's all encompassing, right? If I was a man, then that means I was a good father to my daughter. That means I was a good husband while I was married and I tried as hard as I could. That means I was a good and loyal friend to my friends. I was there when they needed me in every regard, including financially, which is most of the time when friends tend to piss out. Was I there for my company? Was I a man for my investors? Was I a man for my business partners? Or was I a punk? I govern myself in accordance with that one phrase. And that's what makes me do what I think is right in almost every instance. Now, am I always right? No. When I decide I need to do this because I give myself the wrong answer on my deathbed, I'm not always right. Everybody makes mistakes, but that doesn't matter, because the fact of the matter is there's nothing I can do, even if it's wrong or it's a mistake, that I can't make up for, that I can't apologize for, that I can't repent, that I can't learn from. Make a mistake, I'm not going to get eaten. Make a mistake, my daughter's not going to get eaten, right? So barring that, everything is fixable after the fact. And that's really what I think the message is for today. Take a chance. Don't worry about the repercussions. Figure it out until the bitter end. And even if you're wrong, your thick skin is going to befall you. You're going to get better judgment and you'll be ready for the next time. That's the message. That is going to make you feel like your super self. That is going to put you in a position where you have just jumped and you will feel like, for better or worse, you are every bit the person that you wanted to be. And that's really also why that's the subject of my book. I'm currently writing a book. I'm in chapter 4. It's called Just Jump, Become Your Super Self. It's a story about me overcoming abject poverty, putting myself through college, building companies, not being the smartest guy in the room by any means, but being able to outwork. I will say this, I can't necessarily outthink everybody, and I'm definitely not the smartest guy, but I've never met anybody ever that can outwork me. 45 years later, going to the gym every day, 30 years later, running 5 miles a day every day. I was up at 1 o'clock this morning on a call with Japan, and I will work until 7, 8 o'clock tonight. It's Friday here. So I've never met anybody that can outwork me. And if you pair that with the proper drive and the ability to research, right? I don't have to be the smartest guy in the room. I just have to know the smartest guy in the room, have access to the smartest guy in the room, or be able to do a Google or an AI search, and I can get there. So the Just Jump book is really a testament to what we can do, no matter what our circumstances are, how we can align ourselves with success and then perform over time in order to find a quality of life that is absolutely the best for us that it could ever be. And that is the message. Until next time, cheers. Okay, everyone. That brings to a close another episode of the Super Self podcast series brought to you by Jaca Rare Sugar. Here, we are going to be helping you discover the truth for all things that surround good health and well-being. We'll be offering you statistical data, clinical trial information that has been evaluated and corroborated so that you can see for yourself that we say what we mean and we mean what we say. Now, while the Super Self series is brought to you technically by Jaca Rare Sugar, I don't care if you buy the sugar. I really don't. That's not what this is about. This is about operating as the conscience across the food and beverage industry, across the health and well-being industry, which includes supplements, fitness trainers, and the like. Our goal is to provide you with the stepping stones for your own research, where you can go out and corroborate the things that we say on your own. See for yourself what it means to find a good quality of life that fits in alongside your current lifestyle or your family's lifestyle. I think it's really going to be interesting and fascinating if we take this journey together. And once again, our goal is not just to provide you with data, but to keep it interesting. I've been living a clean lifestyle for 40 years now. I've been going to the gym for almost 45 years, eating clean for 40 years. And so we're going to have a ton of stories along the way about the foibles, the successes, and the failures, but we're also going to provide you with the information that you need to carry on and carry forward. Think about subscribing. We'd love it if you subscribe to us, pass this on to your friends. I think we've got a lot of edgy and interesting podcasts that are upcoming, and we certainly will look forward to any feedback that you want to provide. Until next time, cheers.